sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my Lexington home, the October afternoon light filtering through the old lace curtains. The envelope had arrived that morning, thick cream-colored, my son's precise handwriting on the front. For a second, I let myself believe it was the wedding invitation at last. After months of clipped texts and strained silences, my fingers traced the waxy seal, and a little bloom of hope rose in my chest. Maybe I'd been wrong about him shutting me out. Maybe there'd be a little card, a date, a place. Even a scribbled line asking if I'd mind walking him down the aisle like we'd joked about back when he was 10, when everything felt easier. Opened it carefully, angling the paper so I didn't tear anything. With a small tug, the contents slid into my palm, not a card. Not even close. Itemized invoices, crisp and professional. The columns stark and final. $50,000 for a mansion rental just outside Lexington, manicured grounds, chandeliers. $20,000 for catering with imported wine and lobster, flown in from Maine. $10,000 for the honeymoon suite on Maui, with private beach access and rose petals scattered like a movie scene. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note with the slope of my son's familiar letters. Dad, after the problems you've caused the family, be grateful I allowed you to contribute. This covers your share. Send the check soon. Victoria and I are counting on it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I let out a breath and leaned back, the chair creaking. Problems? I could still hear him say it the last time. We spoke in person anger he could never quite aim anywhere but at me. He'd been tired of scraping by after his mother's medical bills crushed us. Tired of my engineering job that never rose any higher after the layoffs in 2009. Tired of casseroles and clipping coupons when his friends' families were booking ski trips and aquamarine vacations. When Alina died in 2015, it was as though he expected me to somehow become invincible, make the grief profitable, squeeze some fortune from the void she left. He called me weak, called me small. He called me a lot of things, each one a hairline fracture and something I kept pretending wasn't broken. I pressed the papers flat again, smoothing the creases my hands had made. Nearby on the table, a Little League photo in a tarnished silver. Frame showed a gap-toothed Kevin, eyes lit up like summer, a grass stain on one knee. His tiny hand in mine. That boy used to climb into my lap during Kentucky thunderstorms and press his ear to my chest just to hear my heartbeat. "Don't worry, Dad," he'd whisper. "You're the strongest." I could hear the rain on the roof of our old sedan, feel the weight of him in my arms. And I couldn't decide whether to laugh or break. Instead, I took my father's pocket watch from my shirt pocket and cupped it in my palm. The tick-tick steadied me. Generations of Carters had listened to that sound on long shifts and longer nights. Alina used to tease me and call it my metronome for patience. Patience. That was the word that came to mind as I read Kevin's note again. I imagined the precise way he'd written that sentence. "Be grateful. I allowed you to contribute in." I felt my jaw loosen. Not with surrender, but with clarity. He thought I would be an ATM on legs, grateful for the privilege of being excluded and financially exploited at the same time. Thought I would pay to disappear. He forgot who taught him to assess a problem from every angle, to learn the system. Before you touched a tool, you forgot that the quiet ones can move mountains if you give them time to plan. I got up, rinsed my face with cold water at the sink, and let the shock burn off like morning fog. Then I pulled the old laptop from the counter and brushed away a film of dust. The screen flickered to life reluctantly, a little like me these days. I typed in the wedding website address he'd sent to the rest of the family months back, a site Victoria had built with pastel fonts and photos of daisies in mason jars. I had never clicked the link. Tonight I did. Their smiling faces filled the screen, Kevin in a navy suit. Victoria's blonde hair swept back, a glinting engagement ring catching sun. I clicked through the tabs. Venue Whitcomb Hall, 7 miles. Outside Lexington, a high society estate with a history blurb about Civil War letters discovered in an attic trunk. Catering, Lexington Bluegrass Table, Chef Preston Ellis. Open bar with a bourbon-tasting flight, band the Mockingbirds. a bluegrass pop fusion group. Planner Dahlia Ross Events. Registry, Crate and Barrel, Restoration Hardware, and a cash fund for adventure in Maui. At the bottom, there was a vendor page. My eyes snagged on a line that shouldn't have been their financial guarantor. Michael Carter. I sat very still. My name. I clicked it open, and a PDF popped up. The edges of a scanned form slanted slightly. I squinted. There it was, my name, my address, my phone number, the last 4 digits of an account I didn't recognize, and a signature that made my stomach turn. It was close to Mina. Very good imitation. The M looped right, the C tucked just so. But it wasn't mine. I closed my eyes for a second, and Elena's voice rose up, the one she used when Kevin was 2 and flushed with fever. When she kept cool while I was all rough edges. Don't react. Respond. Something gentler than anger spread through me, a kind of moral steel. I did not need to yell. I needed to make a call. Hey, Mike. The voice startled me. My neighbor, Harriet Vaughn, called from the backyard fence. Where a clutch of yellow leaves had gathered in the crook of the post, I slid open the back door. Evening, Harriet. Look like someone just told you the Wildcats are moving to Minnesota, she said, eyes twinkling. Something like that, I replied. You remember Kevin's wedding? The boy who used to run through my sprinklers in July? Hard to forget. He sent me the bill, I said, trying for lightness and missing it by a mile. Then I think he signed my name to some contracts. Harriet's eyebrows shot up. Well, honey, that is not how you raise a son. Working on it, I said. I might need to borrow your printer, she nodded, toward her kitchen. Doors open? And Mike? Yeah. Don't let him write your story for you. I printed the vendor page. The signature on that scan felt like a dare. I snapped a photo with my phone and texted a single line to Kevin. Got your note. Let me know when you're free to talk. He responded almost instantly, not sure theirs. Anything to discuss, you can Zelle or send a check. Victoria's dad already covered a lot. Be grateful you still get to be a part of this. I typed slowly. I won't be sending you any money. We should talk in person. His 3 dots flickered. Disappeared. Flickered again. Can't. We're slammed. Just send it. Don't make this a thing. I stared at the screen for a while, then put the phone down. The way you put down a pebble that could start an avalanche. The plan felt clearer than air on a January morning. I would not scream. I would not hurl accusations. I would document, verify, act the next day. I called the number listed for Whitcomb Hall. A woman with a bell-clear voice answered. Whitcomb. Hall, this is Ms. Whitcomb. Good afternoon, I said. My name is Michael Carter. I believe I'm listed as a guarantor for a November event. Her voice warmed. Oh, the Ross Hightower wedding. We're honored to host. On track. I have some concerns, I said. I didn't sign any papers. I won't be responsible for any charges. I'd like to verify what information you have on file. There was a beat, the tone tightened. Course. One moment. That paper shuffled. Keys clicked. We have a guarantor form signed by you, Mr. Carter, with a copy of a driver's license. Whose license? I asked because I hadn't given one. Michael Carter, she said, hesitant now. The photo is dark, hard to make out, but the signature matches the form. It doesn't match mine, I said. Like a copy of everything you've got, and I'd like to put on record that you're using my personal information without my consent. I'll be speaking to legal counsel today, Mr. Carter, Ms. Whitcomb said carefully. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Mistakes happen. We can remove your name. Please do that. And send me the removal confirmation by end of day. When I hung up, I sat for a long time listening to the tick of the watch and the caw of crows gathering in the neighbor's maple tree. Then I called the caterer, then the band, then the planner. Each conversation followed the same pattern: polite. At first, then wary, then very quiet when the word fraud entered the space. Dahlia, the planner, was the most stubborn. I don't know what Victoria told you, she said, impatience buzzing like a gnat. But groom's dads cover things all the time and you're just making drama. Kevin is under a lot of stress. We all are. Send me the document with my signature, I said, and remove me. Fine, she snapped. But you're putting your son in a real bind, I didn't reply. Before lunch, I called Dana Morales, an old friend from the plant who'd left engineering for law school. In her 40s. Oh, Mike, she said after I explained. He forged your signature? That's a Class D felony in Kentucky. You want me to pursue it? I want to draw a clean line around what's mine, I said. I want to send my son to jail yet. You're a better man than most, she murmured. I'll draft letters today, cease this to every vendor. CC the DAS office for credibility. Also, call your bank and put a fraud alert on your identity. I'll have you a packet by evening. That night, I made a pot of chili and ate it standing up, a habit Alina used to scold me about. I could almost feel her hand on my arm, soft and grounding. I pulled out a box from the hall closet and poured through old photos until I found the one I wanted, Kevin, at 8 in Jacobson Park, cheeks pink from the wind. Sitting on the hood of the Ford after a storm while the sun broke through ragged clouds. He had that look kids get when they realize their parents are just people who try. The next morning, I drove to the Lexington Credit Union and spoke to Lila Chin, manager with dark hair piled into a loose bun who had handled our accounts. For years, with quiet efficiency, Mr. Carter, she said, tilting the computer screen toward me. You don't have any recent wires, no large withdrawals, and definitely no transfers to a wedding vendor. But I am seeing something flagged that looks like the beginning of an ACH link to a Maui resort. Maui, I repeated. The honeymoon, right? They attempted to link an account with your name to an external payment processor. It didn't complete because we require a two-factor confirmation. An email went out 2 days ago. Did you authorize it? No. I'll block and put notes all over the file, Lila said. We'll also set up additional verification. If any checks over $5,000 are attempted, I'm sorry you're going through this. Thank you, I said, meaning it. The kindness of a bank manager can weigh more than gold on the right day. On my way out, I passed a bulletin board with flyers. For neighborhood events, one flyer caught my eye. St. James Community Church Fall Potluck this Saturday. All welcome. Bring a dish if you can. I pulled one down, folded it, and put it in my pocket without thinking. The week ticked by. Dana's letters went out certified. Mail and email. One by one, confirmations slid into my inbox like cautious birds. Removal confirmed. Name removed. We apologize for the oversight. Dahlia sent an email that read entirely like a scream typed politely. This is putting the couple in jeopardy. We can't hold their date without a guarantor. We'll have to explore other options. I wrote back one sentence. I hope you do. By Friday morning, a week before the wedding, my phone rang at 7:02 a.m., Kevin. I let it buzz twice before I answered. Hey, son. The sound that met my ear wasn't the boy from the photograph. It was a man boxed in by his own choices. What did you do? He hissed. Do you have any idea the mess you just made? Whitcomb Hall wants another deposit and a guarantor, and they're threatening to cancel. Preston is saying we don't have a payment method, and Dahlia is mad at me. Tell me you didn't pull this crap out of spite. I corrected a mistake, I said. You used my name without my permission. It was a formality, he said. They required a parent. I knew you'd help. I knew you wrote be grateful I allowed you to contribute, Kevin, I said, keeping my voice calm. That's not asking, that's telling. And you forged my signature. Silence flared, hot and embarrassed. It's not a big deal, he tried. If you're so hung up on the principle, I'll cross it out with a pen. Just send the 80 grand and we can move forward. You're being dramatic. Lena used to say something very simple to you, I said. You remember? He was quiet. What? Choices have consequences, I said. That wasn't a threat. It was the most loving sentence she knew. Stop with the life lesson, he snapped. Victoria's parents are here. We've told everyone the bar is full shelf. Maui is booked. Don't make us look, he swallowed. Don't humiliate me, Dad. Son, I said softly, you. Did that yourself? The line clicked dead. Stood in the kitchen, feeling more old than I had in a long time, and watched a squirrel race along the fence line toward the bare mulberry tree. I poured coffee, the simple ritual bringing me back to earth, and sat with my pocket watch open beside the mug. I didn't plan the timing so everything would collapse at once. That part wasn't me. That part was the way one pin touches another. and the energy goes where it goes. That afternoon, Miss Whitcomb called. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice controlled. "We have a policy about fireworks. The couple discussed a display, and our insurance requires a licensed operator. We asked the planner for a certificate. She hasn't provided one. Without it, we will cancel the permit request with the county. I appreciate your concern for safety," I said, pressing my lips together so the smile wouldn't creep out. "I hoped you'd say that," she replied. "We've also required an additional liability policy because the guest count has soared beyond what was initially proposed. Without it, we cannot host." At the same hour, Leela from the credit union left a voicemail. "Mr. Carter.
Gots.
Someone attempted to draw a cashier's check this morning for $24,000 from your account at a branch in Nicholasville. They had an ID that looked amateur. We declined. I thought you should know." I forwarded the voicemail to Dana. 12 minutes later, she texted, "One more misstep, Mike, and we'll have to file. Stay the course." Saturday morning, I drove out to Whitcomb Hall under a sky the color of bruise. The hedges were clipped into obedient domes along a drive that curved past a fountain, where the water had been shut off for the season. An older man in a brown cap was sweeping the steps. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. "Just admiring," I said. "I'm not here to cause trouble." He leaned on his broom and grinned. "You and everyone else this week, Miles." "Caretaker, Mike," I said. "Caretaker of my own little corner of ruin," he chuckled. "You the dad, aren't you?" "Yes." He spit into the grass and shook his head. "They brought in a planner who told me to move the statue to the other side of the lawn because, quote, the marble vibe felt north-facing," I told her. "This statue weighs 600 pounds, and the marble vibe can face the Lord for all I care." Honest question. Why do folks forget what makes an event good? "What's that?" I asked. He tapped his forehead. "People. You get the right people. All in a place with a little music and something to eat, and you got yourself a fine day. The rest is dressing." I drove home thinking about that word. Dressing, not substance. By Monday, the emails from vendors turned more adamant. Without a guarantor, they were backing out. Dahlia tried to strong-arm the caterer. The caterer sent a reply I read twice for pleasure. "We cannot cook for an event that refuses to pay us." It was like someone turning the lights on in a room you didn't realize was dim. Tuesday, Kevin's text escalated. "We need to meet. You can bring the check. We can talk in the parking lot if you're afraid." I turned my phone face down. Called. I didn't pick up. He called again. I let it ring. Wednesday afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Victoria standing on my porch in a cranberry sweater, eyes rimmed red. She had always struck me as somewhat polished and distant in person, all slender lines and quick smiles, but today she looked small and human and 27. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice tentative. "May I come in?" I hesitated and then stepped aside. "Of course." She perched on the edge of the couch like a bird deciding whether to stay. "I shouldn't be here," she began. "Kevin would lose it if he knew, but I wanted to look you in the eye." I nodded. "Tea, please." "In the kitchen," I added. "Honey to a mug," because Elena used to do that when people were about to cry. When I handed it to Victoria, her hand shook. "I didn't know he'd put your name down," she said. "He told me his dad had always planned to pay for most of it. My parents are helping too, but not like. This I saw you removed as guarantor. Dahlia said you were ruining our lives." She bit the inside of her cheek hard. "Are you?" "Yep." "Protecting mine?" I said. "He's trying to be someone," she whispered. "At the tech firm, his friends all have these big weddings and honeymoons. He wants to prove he belongs." I sat, the couch cushion sighing under me. "Do you love him?" She nodded without hesitation and then paused. "I think so," she added softly. "I love him when he's not panicking about being perfect, Elena." "Baked brownies," I said suddenly, and Victoria blinked. When Kevin won something at school, she didn't buy balloons. She baked. He would come home and smell chocolate from the driveway, and it meant more than any trophy. That's what I learned from her. You can fuss about the balloon, or you can bake something warm for the people you love. Victoria's eyes filled. think I've been the balloon, she said. He keeps telling me how his boss's wife is well-polished and how our friends. We'll talk about our wedding for years, and I got swept up. And then yesterday I found a copy of a signature he sent to the band. It wasn't yours. It was his trying to look like yours. I didn't say anything, didn't know what to say. You do know, I said gently. You're choosing whether to be loved or displayed. She let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. What do we even do? The hall, the food, the music, everything is falling apart. My mother is on the verge of losing her mind. The Hawkinses pulled out. The honeymoon might not even be booked, Kevin said. He said you're dead to him, and that isn't true for me. I don't want that to be true. I thought of how many times I had rehearsed. What I'd say if the day ever came when my son softened enough to listen. I thought of how none of those rehearsals had included her sitting on my couch, shaking, asking for a way forward. Here's a thought, I said. You still can have a wedding. It probably won't be the one you saw on Pinterest. Can have something beautiful. St. James Church is 4 blocks from here. They've got a hall and a piano and old ladies who can feed an army with 3 casseroles. We could have a service there. Pastor John will say yes before I finish my sentence. Harlan and Maria have a bluegrass trio that will play for a gift. Card Harriet will bake pies that will make your future grandchildren weep. Victoria held the mug in both hands. The honey had melted into the tea. What about Kevin? That's his decision, I said. We don't take away his choices. He chose the path he's on. He can choose a different one. She sniffed and smiled into the steam. You'd really do that for me? For both of you, I said. Not because I owe you a wedding, but because I'd like to remember my son the way he was in Jacobson Park, trusting me to keep him dry when the world felt like it might flood. She stared at the fireplace for a long time. I'll talk to him, she said finally. If he can hear it. She stood, and I walked, heard at the door. Before she left, she turned and hugged me quickly, awkwardly, and then stepped away embarrassed. I'm sorry, she said, which was a bigger sentence than she probably realized. And then she was gone. Thursday brought more unraveling. The Mockingbirds emailed to say they'd booked another event. The florist offered a scale-back bouquet package if they could pay cash. The planner sent a final blistering note that read like the end of a long argument with herself. At noon, I drove to St. James. Pastor John, tall and spare with kind eyes, listened to me describe a hypothetical wedding that might happen Saturday if the groom could see what mattered. Bring them, he said. My aunties have punch bowls older than sin. If they don't show, we'll pack up the food and take it to the shelter. Either way, no waste. That afternoon, I strung white Christmas lights along the church hall's beams with a handful of volunteers, the lights throwing gentle halos on the floor. Harriet brought a stack of quilted tablecloths. Lena would approve, she said, and I had to turn away for a second. The flood cresting and then receding. Friday night, a storm rolled in. At Whitcomb Hall, the rehearsal dinner sputtered. Kevin texted me once a naked, raw line. Did you tell Victoria to go to a church? I took a breath and typed back. I offered an option. Love doesn't always look like a chandelier. An hour later, my phone lit up again. It was not Kevin. It was Lorraine Hightower, Victoria's mother. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice readable in its layered edges, wealth, pride, exhaustion. It seems my soon-to-be-soon-in-law is overextended. We were led to believe your contribution was secure, Lorraine. I said, my contribution is secure. It's just not money. Help me understand something, she said, a brittleness. Hovering under the words, are you punishing Kevin? I'm teaching him, I said. I wish I'd done more of that when it mattered. It still matters. She was quiet, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped an octave, past guard, and into something human. We lost a business last year, she said. No one knows. We've been performing wealth we don't have, and we all need to stop pretending. Saturday morning came gray and damp. Leaves glued themselves to the sidewalk. I got dressed. In my best suit, the navy one Elena loved and tucked the old pocket watch into the vest pocket, the chain glinting like a memory you can hold. I took a breath and headed out. At Whitcomb Hall, parking attendants stood with forced smiles and soggy shoes. Inside the foyer, I could see clusters of guests trying to look comfortable while somewhat smiling men in suits whispered into phones. The hall smelled like rain and perfume and nerves. My name rose on a current of whispers. Mike Carter, the dad he banned. The one who wouldn't pay. I didn't go in. I stood by a column where I could see the edge of the main room. Light flickered. Off the crystal. Quartet wasn't there. Only a Bluetooth speaker anchored to a corner stool. Dahlia paced, her clipboard now a shield. A door opened, and Victoria stepped out, hair pinned low, dressed simple and elegant despite everything. She scanned the hallway, found me, and lifted a hand. I lifted mine back. My son appeared behind her, jaw tight, tie askew, eyes dark with lack of sleep and too many opinions. He saw me. For a second, all I saw was the boy in the rain on Jacobson Park. Then his mouth hardened. "You had no right to come," he said, gripping the edge of the door like he might fling it at me. "We made a guest list. It didn't make the cut." "I'm not here to crash your wedding," I said. "I'm here because you're my son." "You think this is some teachable moment?" said, voice low and furious. "You think embarrassing me in front of everyone is going to make me respect you? You could have just paid. You could have made this easy. Alina used to say," I began. And he flinched like the name was a matchstick, lit near dry tinder. "Don't use Mom as a prop," he snarled. "She would have helped me. She would have loved you," I said. "And she would have told you no." "Kevin," Victoria said quietly, a warning and a plea. Lorraine had slid into the hall behind her, her hand at her throat. "Did you forge my name?" I asked. I didn't raise my voice. The silence around us did that for me. His eyes flashed. "I did what I had to do for us," he said, glancing toward Victoria like announcing the lie, as love might make it less of one. Lorraine inhaled. "Kevin was going to pay you back," he said quickly, desperate to find a handhold in a cliff face. "With what?" I asked, pride. He took a step toward me, then stopped, the vein in his neck thrumming. I realized I wasn't angry anymore, not truly. I was sad for a man trapped inside a costume he chose that now chose him back. "There's a service. At St. James at 5, I said. "There'll be a hall with lights and a pianist named Millie who makes grown men cry when she hits the last chord of Amazing Grace. There'll be pork sliders and deviled eggs and children sliding on sock feet. And my neighbor Harriet's pecan pie. If you want to get married today, to begin something real, we will be there. If not, we'll pack the food up and feed the shelter. Love will get spent either way." He laughed once, a sound like glass breaking. "You want me to leave Wickham? Hall for a church basement. I want you to choose a marriage over a wedding," I said. Behind him, voices rose. Someone asked about the florist. The speaker stuttered. Dahlia's voice sharpened and cracked. The band didn't come. The bartender called out that the bourbon order had been canceled by the distributor when payment didn't come through. Somewhere near the dining room, a tower of champagne coupes rattled ominously, and then, as if on cue, collapsed with a delicate shattering. A cousin clapped a hand over her mouth. Could almost hear Miles mutter from the lawn about marble vibes facing the Lord. Victoria swallowed and looked between us. She wore no necklace, no earrings. It's the dress, and her face, which was suddenly very young and very taut with a choice. "I can't do this," she said, but I didn't know which this she meant until she turned to Kevin and took his hands. "Not like this, not if it's all debt and lies. I love you, but I need the truth first. I need you to be the man you want everyone to think you are." He pulled his hands away as if scalded, shame a brief flicker in his eyes before indignation shoved it aside. "You're leaving?" he demanded. "Because my father decided to." "This isn't your father's fault," she said gently. "It's yours." Her mother put a hand on her arm, and for the first time since I'd known her, Lorraine looked not like a patron of the symphony, but like a mother who had sat up late with a sick child and memorized the curve of her cheek. "In lamplight, there's a church at 5, she said softly. "We can go, or we can go home. But we can't stay here and pretend this is fine." 100 things might have happened then. He might have shouted. He might have begged. He might have run. All he did was stand there, breath shallow, eyes darting to the ballroom, to the hallway. It's the portrait of some Whitcomb ancestor who'd probably judged him from a frame. "I'm not leaving," said at last, that old stubborn tilt back. In his chin, Victoria nodded, tears catching and then spilling an honest storm. "Then I am." I stepped aside. I did not touch her arm. I did not say I'm sorry. I simply moved so she could walk past me toward a different future. At St. James. The light through the stained glass made the air look like it tasted sweet. Harriet was bustling near the kitchen, a tea towel thrown over her shoulder like a flag. "Of truce?" "Well," she asked. "Some will come," I said. "Some won't." She nodded. "We always cook like all will come and then send plates home if they don't." By 5, the room filled with people who cared less about being seen and more about seeing. Pastor John straightened his tie. Millie ran scales and hummed a verse under her breath. Lorraine slipped in with Victor No. That was Gerald Hightower, as if we were being introduced anew. He carried a stack of old linen napkins and a face that had lost a bit of its scaffolding and looked better for it. "Can I help set tables?" he asked, and Harriet handed him a stack of forks, like a benediction. At 5:15, the doors opened, and Victoria walked in, her dress damp at the hem from a rush across wet grass. She didn't have a bouquet. Heidi had pinned a little corsage to her wrist, a sprig of eucalyptus and a single white rose someone found at home. She stood at the front with Pastor John and took a breath. "We'll wait a few minutes," she said, voice steady and trembling all at once. We waited. The room hummed with quiet hope, the kind that doesn't demand but invites. At 5:22, the doors opened again, and my son walked in. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His hair was, dim, flattened by rain. He looked 10 years different than he had that morning. He walked up the aisle and stopped in front of Victoria and did not take her hands without asking. "Can I?" he whispered. She nodded, and he did, his palms open like offerings. He turned to the people in the room, neighbors, church aunties, a cleaning crew from the plant on the way home from an overtime shift, my friend Miles in a suit that didn't fit. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. "I lied," he said. "I lied to make us look like something we aren't because I didn't believe the truth was enough. I used my father's name like a credit card. I tried to cash in his love without asking if it was mine to spend. If you'll still marry me, I will spend my life paying that debt back in kindness. And if you won't, I'll understand. I'll be what I should have been in the first place. Honest." Nobody clapped. It didn't feel like a moment for clapping. It felt like holding our breath together and letting it out at the same time. Victoria closed her eyes and opened them, and when she spoke, it was not dramatic. It was simple. "Yes," she said. Pastor John nodded, his smile quick and pleased, and began to speak words that had been spoken in 1,000 rooms like this one, about love that keeps no ledger of wrongs, about vows that are not event decor but seed planted in soil. Millie played, and someone's baby squeaked, and an auntie dabbed her eyes with a wad of napkin. And my pocket watch voted with its tick for endurance. When it was done, I stepped forward. Kevin's face crumpled for a second, shame and relief, colliding, and he looked like the boy he'd been, mud on his knees, apology on his lips before he'd really found the words. "Dad," he said, was both an address and a question. I took the pocket watch from my vest and placed it in his hand. The metal was warm for my body. "Your grandfather gave this to me the day I married your mom," I said. He told me not to waste time on things that don't last. I wasn't always good at it. You don't have to be me, but you can be better. He looked down at the watch like it was magic, and then up at me like something new had cracked open in the ceiling of his life. He nodded. It wasn't an apology, not fully. That would come later. But it was the beginning of one. The food that night tasted like mercy. Harriet's pies disappeared in 8 minutes. Gerald refilled the punch bowl twice. Miles danced with 3 of the church ladies in slow loops that made everyone grin. Victoria's friend from work stood on a chair and sang a rough, beautiful hallelujah. Kevin laughed, and when he did, it sounded less like glass and more like weather breaking. Went outside for a second and stood under the awning. The rain had lightened to a mist that made the streetlights glisten. The blue and white sign for St. James hummed softly, a tired neon that had had things go wrong and still kept doing its job. I thought of Whitcomb Hall, how it had probably been put right by then, the staff sweeping up glass, the planner sending emails, the guests dispersing in Uber headlights. Dressing Miles had said, and I smiled. Later, most of the casseroles had been wrapped in tinfoil and sent to the shelter, and the kids had been peeled off the floor and convinced to put their shoes back on, walked home carrying nothing. But a paper plate in my empty vest pocket, the house was quiet. The envelope with Kevin's bill sat where I'd pushed it days ago, its corners curling slightly. Took it, folded it in two, and put it in the drawer with the instruction manuals for appliances I no longer owned. A week later, Kevin and Victoria came by with a plant, something green and sturdy, and a pie that was not Harriet level but still edible. We sat at the table where the bill had sat and ate slices with forks. I made a report, I told him softly. What? About the signature. Dana advised it. It's on file, but I told her I wouldn't pursue it unless it got worse. Kevin flushed and nodded. I deserved worse, he said. But I'm grateful you didn't give it to me. I didn't do it for you, I said, and he looked startled, then hurt, and then finally, curious. I did it because I needed to turn a moment into a lesson. You're the one who gets to keep turning it into your life. We talked about Maui, which they postponed. They booked a cabin in Red River Gorge instead and sent me a photo of them in hiking boots, hair windblown, a single thermos between them. It was better than the Maui brochure by a mile. On the first day of December, I walked to Jacobson Park and sat on the bench where we'd watched storms when he was 8. The lake was pewter, ducks stitching their V's across the surface. A little boy ran past, chasing a leaf like it was a prize. His dad jogged behind him, laughing, and I felt the ache and the balm of time in one swallow. My phone buzzed. Photo from Kevin. A close-up of the pocket watch on his palm, chain curled, like a question mark. Under it, 2 words that were nothing and everything. Thank you. There's a temptation to make stories neat, to wrap them with a bow and call them done. But the truth is, I still have a son who can be proud. I still have a scar from a day he told. Me, I was small. He still has a habit of wanting to impress. We are both still men whose first instincts aren't always our best ones. But we have a stronger second instinct now. We breathe. We ask. We tell the truth, or try to. And when we forget, we remember sooner. If you're listening to this and you've been handed a thick cream envelope by someone who thinks you'll pay to be erased, hear me. You don't have to set the house on fire to make your point. Sometimes you just have to turn off the gas. You gather your facts. You call the right people. You say no, like you're saying yes to something else. You take your hurt and plant it where it might turn into something worth eating later. You bake the brownies. You string the lights in the church hall. You let the marble vibe face whoever it's going to face. The dream my son had of being rich for a day, of glinting under chandeliers became a nightmare when the invoices fell. A part in the glass tower fell and the speakers stuttered. But the nightmare turned out to be the start of waking up. He didn't get Maui. He got Millie's last chord and a room of people who would show up again when the baby runs a fever or the pipes burst at midnight. That feels like a richer kind of wealth. At home that night, I took the framed photo from the kitchen and set it in the living room where I sit after dinner. Gap-toothed Kevin grinned at me. I smiled back. We did okay, kid, I told him.